The one positive silver lining of 2020 is that economic anxiety is dead. Thank God. No one's talking about it anymore because we're living in a recession. There's a pandemic that has killed 250,000 people. The debt's gone up. The deficit's gone up. The trade war has been a disaster. And they still voted for him. So yeah, spare me your economic anxiety. And every single sober professional study done in the past 4 years reveals that the primary, not exclusive, the primary motivator of Trump voters has been cultural anxiety, white anxiety.
Yep.
Right? And specifically what it is they believe that you and me are replacing them. They're losing power. This is no longer the country that they represent. They are coming and taking the jobs. They are coming in and telling them what's right and wrong. They are attacking their identity. It's become an existential crisis. And so this is what I say is the death rattle of white supremacy globally that has transformed into a death march. And until, I'm sorry to say this, white people do their work in confronting and acknowledging their role. And also people of color, let's be honest, people of color think they're white. Hilarious. We could talk about that for a second. If we confront our role in how we have helped sustain this architecture of oppression called white supremacy, unless we acknowledge it, we can't destroy it. And I have seen that in America, people will literally let you mock their mother, but they won't let you call them racist. They'll literally talk about anything else except about racism. Because if you acknowledge racism and you talk about racism, you have to talk about how you're complicit in upholding racism. And then you have to talk about reforming a racist society, which is a conversation, Danielle, that nobody in America ever wants to have, ever. And until you do it, it's not going to change, in my humble opinion.
No, and it's true. And what I always find really funny, right? Because these are the same groups of people that want to tell us that white privilege is a myth, it's a hoax, it doesn't exist, right? Then what are you so afraid of being taken away from you? Right? If it doesn't exist, if you have no power, if we're all quote unquote equal, then why are you so concerned about the demographic shift? The concern is that when people of color get into power and have the numbers, then they're going to treat you the way that you've treated us. But you don't want to admit that. And that to me is like is crazy town. Right? Because you tell me that something doesn't exist, but it's where your fear stems from.
And you're absolutely right. And it's old school colonial mindset. It's what the British said to the South Asians as they were colonizing them and oppressing them, is that if we give you freedom, you will turn around and put the boot on our neck like we have put the boot on your neck. A white supremacist slaveholder said that if we give these blacks freedom, they will turn around and revisit the savagery upon us that we have visited upon them. You hear that even in Israel when I talk to settlers. They have to earn their freedom. They have to prove to us that they're civilized. And the fear is, and to many of my friends, they admit this, they go, we are afraid that if we stop occupying, that they will turn around and then occupy us. And the irony is that historically, if you just focus on America, if you look at indigenous Americans and African Americans, who probably have been the most oppressed, right? It's those who are most victimized who end up being the saviors of America.
All the time.
It's those who are unwelcomed who are the most welcoming. It's those who are told that you don't belong who fight for the American dream, right? And you see black folks, like, I'll be honest, I had this conversation with my wife. I said, how do black people not rise up and just freaking kill white folks in this country? And I realized a lot of people might be like, Wajahat, how can you say that? But look at how this country tolerates Kyle Rittenhouse's temper tantrum, and the McCloskeys, right? And Eddie Gallagher and Donald Trump, who have not suffered a fraction of the oppression. And then black folks are still decent and humane and fight for this country, right? And that just shows you that we don't want special status. That's why I told Trump voters, we just want equal status. When we want an invite to the party, we don't want to take over the party. We don't want to replace you. We just want a seat at the table. But if you have been in power your whole life, equality looks like oppression.
Come on.
If you're listening to this right now, I'll give you an example, which I shared with Trump voters. And I think I got some of them thinking. Suppose you're in a boardroom. There's 10 seats. And for 40 years, all those 10 seats are white dudes. Then one day, Danielle comes in. And you're thinking, now there's only 9 seats. Danielle's thinking, oh my God, I got a seat. Hooray! And then fast forward 5 years, Waj comes in. I'm thinking, it's me and Danielle. We made it to the party. They're thinking 8 seats. And then 5 years later, Kamala comes in. We're like, hooray, 3 out of 10. And they're thinking 7 seats. From their perspective, we are the invaders taking over what rightfully belongs to them. And what rightfully belongs to them, which they'll never admit publicly, is America. And our job is to be second class to their victimhood, their fears, their anxiety, their anger, their rage, their ideology. I just wish they would admit it, but they never will. Instead, they manufacture perpetual victimhood. And that's what you get on Fox News, perpetual victimhood and outrage, where they're the victim and we have to tend to our oppressors' perceived wounds as they have the boots on our neck. White supremacy is insane.
I mean, that is, I love that. I love that. And I will have to friggin' use that boardroom setup because that's exactly right. You are taking, that is taking, not equalizing, not creating equity, right? It is the assumption that you deserved and earned and are supposed to always have those 10 seats. You know, I think about it because we're watching this week as Biden creates his cabinet, right? And we're looking at the diversity and the women and the people of color and the stories of immigrant families and all of these things. And I'm saying to myself, this is America. And I think about the pictures in contrast that we've seen of Trump's boardrooms. They look like the boardrooms that you presented. Not even near a woman.
Yep. Not even a white woman.
Not even a white woman. But these white women support him. That's just locker room talk because they don't feel because they are a part of their own victimhood, which will be a talk for another day. And how, please.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please continue. No, you're right. Even people of color who voted for Trump. Let's talk about them real quick if we can. You know, immigrants who voted for Trump. There's several reasons. I talked to them as well. Tax cuts, number one. Greedy, selfish. That's it. Simple. Tax cuts. Number two, disinformation. I read something somewhere. I got a WhatsApp message. Both sides are the same, whatever. Disinformation also radicalizes people of color. Number three, many of them still chase whiteness and run away as far as they can from blackness. Let's just keep it honest. They believe that whiteness will embrace them. They live in the suburbs. They came here the right way. They worked hard. They pulled themselves from the bootstraps. Why are we giving money to them? And them is always blacks and Latinos. Let's be honest. I'm the good immigrant. I'm the good person of color. I had a Honduran woman in that main rally literally come up to me. I interviewed her. I'm like, why are you here? And she goes, I have to vote for Donald Trump. He will save this country. Hillary's the worst. I'm like, you're from Honduras. Like, he hates you. He goes, no. I came here the right way. I'm the good immigrant.
So he can tell that by looking at you?
No. That's no, seriously. But she said those undocumented, they're cheating. I had to wait my line, my turn in the line. I came here the right way, and they're coming in. So she wanted to punish those Latinos who were quote unquote the undocumented, the illegal, the aliens who came here the wrong way. She was the good immigrant, and she said, "I'll even go back to Honduras if Clinton is elected again." And so white supremacy is a hell of a drug. Colonialism is a hell of a drug. It infects people of color. It makes you think you're white. It makes you think you're accepted in whiteness. And I can't help people who don't realize they have black and brown skin. It's something that has to be kind of deprogrammed in them. But even with all this, I'll say this to your listeners, and maybe I'm the crazy one, Danielle. I still don't want them to suffer. They need you and me to suffer. I told them, I want you to have healthcare. I want you to have Social Security. I want you to have jobs. I want you to have high-speed internet. I want you to have infrastructure. I want your children to be co-protagonists of the American narrative. That's what it would take for me to feel great again. And for you to feel great again, you need Donald Trump to humiliate me, to ban me, to mock me, and to make fun of my religion and my people. And that's the difference. You need me to suffer to feel great again. I want you to succeed. And that's the story of America.
Trumpism doesn't leave with Trump.
That's right.
Right? Pandora's box has been opened. It's not being closed. We're not putting the racist genie back in the bottle.
That's right.
What do you think? What is your advice to the incoming Biden-Harris administration in terms of how we even begin to process a quote-unquote healing, right? When there's a refusal to recognize the pain. I use this example and I say, how do you dress a wound that you refuse to see is there? A wound needs to be cleaned out, right? It needs to be cleaned out, and then it needs to be sealed up.
Mm.
But you can't do that if I'm looking at it and the wound isn't there. I refuse to look at the wound. I'm not bleeding. You're bleeding. What does the Biden and Harris administration do with this?
You can't get to reconciliation without truth. Exactly what you said. So you need truth. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris need to be the president and vice president of America. They have to be the leaders of a country where a third of the country hates them, where they're fed disinformation. And like I said in the piece, is we have to build a multicultural coalition of the willing and just move forward and keep the door open. But at the same time, we can't wait. And so we have to kind of drag them to the future. They hated Obamacare. They thought it would turn this country into a socialist country. Fast forward 10 years. They like Obamacare. So you go ahead and be bold with your progressive vision for America. We need a new deal. Don't let Republicans frame what is moderate, what is decent, what is progressive, what is patriotic. They've lost all of it. They lost all of it in the past 4 years. They have zero ground and standing to say anything. Be bold. Define what it means to be a Democrat. Define what it means to be a progressive. Have a white tent agenda. You can win over some of these voters, I think, with an economic agenda if you name it, if you message it, and if you build those policies that give higher wages to folks, that expand healthcare, right? Invest in infrastructure. And then you also have to name it. You have to call out white supremacy. You have to educate America about the poison of white supremacy. You have to crack down on white domestic terrorism. I think you have to be transparent, Danielle. There's a lot of folks, a lot of people of color who don't vote. And I understand where they're coming from. They say, what has this country done for me? You hear black men saying it. You hear Muslim men saying it. And, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican. What have you done to me? You've sent drones over to Muslim countries. You surveil us. You lock us up. F you all. So there has to be a reckoning with our own sins. And there has to be a transparency where you say, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. Let me explain it to you. And then finally, what I'll say is, so you tackle income inequality if you can with better policies. You tackle racism as best as you can by acknowledging it, talking about it, dismantling it. And then you have to tackle the disinformation system, which I think is a major threat in America. And this is where you have to make Mark Zuckerberg and Jack at Twitter bend. And they will bend. Power bends. Power allows other people to bend. If you don't believe me, GM right now, all of a sudden, changed its tune because the Biden administration's coming in, right? All of a sudden, they're like, hey, we'll comply with these EPA restrictions. And I worked with Facebook before. I'll tell you, they dropped all of their funding for this stuff I was doing on digital literacy and helping communities use social media to combat hate once the Trump administration came in. Why? Because Trump administration didn't care. Biden comes in, I want him to unleash Warren, unleash the Kraken on social media. Because at the very least, if you get Facebook and social media and Twitter to go after hate mongers, deplatform them, do more to combat disinformation, you can really help minimize the radicalization of a part of America. And then we have to find a way to go after the Murdochs, Lachlan and Rupert Murdoch.
Yep.
And Democrats have to get their shit together, really invade Facebook, talk radio, and the podcast space.
100%.
And message. And the final thing I'll say is stop being afraid of your own shadow Democrats. Don't let the right wing define what progressive means. Don't let the right wing monopolize what the moderate center is. Enough. Fight. I want fighters. I want the Biden-Harris administration to develop an X-Force. And that's a beautiful comic book analogy because if they're the X-Men, the X-Force is kind of like a side splinter group that does like the dirty ops. You got to take them on in the gutter. You got to fight the right-wing media ecosystem. You can no longer bring a policy paper to a knife fight because Mitch McConnell's bringing a rocket launcher. And there's a way to do it while still maintaining your ethics. This is my vision. I think if Biden and Harris can do all of this in 4 years, there is a way to sustain this fragile democracy, win enough people, and then we have to, the last thing I'll say is people might think this is too harsh. This is a generational fight. We have to outlast them. Just like in 1954, when they ended segregation, you saw those angry white faces scowling at the young black girls who were just trying to go to a desegregated school. That's a generational fight. They went to church, they eat meatloaf, they were parents, they were nice, they weren't villains. But it took 30, 40 years for some of them to de-radicalize. And let's be honest, some of them went to their death still with hate in their heart.
Yeah.
We can't wait anymore. We got to move forward. Sorry for that long TED talk. You asked me a question. I gave you an answer.
I love it.